Save your time, save your money. Welcome to Rotten Real Roll. I'm Sinmin. Today, we're going to talk about Shah Rukh Khan's new film, Jawan. Over the past few months, I've endured a grueling drought of good movies, forced to watch over 20 awful films, nearly reaching the brink of despair. Thankfully, as we approach the end of summer, we've finally been graced with Shah Rukh Khan's Jawan. This might just be the only worthwhile film I've seen in the second half of 2023. Enough with the preamble. Let's dive right in. Although Jawan stands as the best film I've seen in the latter half of 2023 so far, I must say it falls into the category of being a good but not outstanding, hovering around 7 out of 10. In comparison, the movie Missing released in January might have an edge. Oh, let me add, the latter has an IMDb rating of only 7.1, lower than Jawan's 7.6. But I believe this comparison is clearly unfair. Missing has been severely underrated. Moreover, just last year, India witnessed the release of two similar yet superior films, Jana Gana Mana and A Thursday. Its ability to stand out among other releases in the same period may be attributed to its timing, given that 2023 seems to be a year with an unusually low number of good films. Another intriguing aspect is the polarized reviews of Jawan on IMDb, where those who liked it mostly rated it between 8 and 10, while negative reviews predominantly rated it below 3, mostly from Indian audiences. So, what's the deal with this film? What story does it tell? Let's find out. Explaining this part of the content actually puts me in a dilemma. Revealing too much would spoil the movie for potential viewers, but being vague, avoiding discussion of the plot altogether would lead to a generic review focusing on Shah Rukh Khan's performance, the beauty of the female cast, the quality of action scenes, special effects, and so on. So, I've decided on a half-spoiler approach. Firstly, before delving into the plot, let's analyze why this film has garnered such polarized reviews. My deduction is that if you haven't watched many Indian films and are emotionally inclined, Jawan will most likely amaze you because the story is cleverly designed. However, if you've seen over 30 highly rated Bollywood movies and have a more rational approach, with a high demand for film logic and attention to detail, Jawan might disappoint you because you are more familiar with the typical patterns of Indian cinema. Much like Hollywood's popcorn flicks, Indian masala movies also has certain formulaic patterns. First, about 80% of these movies deal with anti-establishment themes. Virtually all crime films point the finger at government corruption, caste systems, election fraud, collusion between officials and businessmen, and so forth. Even non-crime films like Three Idiots or Hindi Medium mildly reflect on issues within the educational system. Second, the dissatisfaction with the system is often channeled by a lone hero who seeks justice through means beyond legal frameworks. The protagonist may be a vigilante or may incite protests by stirring public opinion. Eventually, the government responds, and the protagonist's efforts triggering change. Of course, these patterns aren't exclusive to Bollywood. American and South Korean films also explore similar themes. Still, Indian cinema stands out for its focus on this particular type of narrative. With that background, you might already guess where Jawan is headed. As soon as Shah Rukh Khan appears on screen as the male lead, alongside a group of girls robbing a subway while posing as hijackers, you can probably deduce that this is most likely a revenge story. The male lead or someone in his family must have been victims of government corruption. The only real question left is how it all happened. For storytelling convenience, let's assign aliases to the main characters. This is Shah Rukh Khan, who plays dual roles. One is the male lead in a prison warden of a women's prison, and the other is his father. This is the female lead, a police officer. This is Deepika Padukone playing the role of the male lead's mother. This is the primary antagonist, Vijay Sethupathi, portraying an arms dealer. The film tells a modern-day Robin Hood story of seeking revenge for parents. As the prison warden, the male lead organizes a group of female prisoners to hijack a subway train and demand a huge ransom from the government. The main antagonist, a military arms dealer, sponsors the government to pay the ransom because his daughter is one of the hostages. Meanwhile, the female police officer responsible for capturing the male lead meets him due to an arranged engagement but falls in love with him. They decide to get married, but on their wedding night, the female officer discovers that her husband is the mastermind behind the kidnapping she has been investigating. At this moment, they are both kidnapped by a group of unknown individuals. only to be rescued by another group with mysterious backgrounds, leading to events that unravel a decades-old mystery. That's all I can reveal about the plot. I can't say more. You might be wondering why this plot sounds familiar.
कोलाबा पुलिस स्टेशन बोला
मैं कोलाबा के लिटिल डॉट्स प्ले स्कूल से बात कर रही हूँ नैना जायसवाल
Yes, a similar storyline was seen in A Thursday, which was released last year. In that film, a kindergarten teacher kidnaps all the kids and demands a conversation with the government through social media because she had been a victim of rape and police inaction. If the storytelling technique of setting up suspense and then revealing unexpected twists used to be refreshing in the era of movies like The Terror Live in South Korea and Run Out of Time in Hong Kong, it now feels somewhat outdated. However, in comparison to most Hollywood films of the past year, Jawan still stands out because it addresses real-world social issues. As with many Indian films of the past, the case highlighted in this film draws inspiration from real events. For instance, the 2017 Gorakhpur hospital death, the earlier Bofors scandal, which was a major weapons contract scandal, and the more prevalent issue of farmer suicides. This is one reason why many Indian viewers are so passionate about the film, as many of them can resonate with it. Movies and television series, to some extent, are responses by artists to societal demands. Over the years, Indian cinema has engaged in shaping and discussing numerous social issues, caste problems, rape issues, female oppression under patriarchal systems, and rigid educational systems. In contrast, let's look at Hollywood. What have our box office rankings been filled with this year? Countless remakes of The Little Mermaid, along with The Meg 2, The Equalizer 3, Expendables 4, Insidious 5, Scream 6, Mission Impossible 7, Fast and Furious 10, who knows which installment of Transformers, and a slew of sequels from Marvel and DC movies. Perhaps only two films can be considered somewhat related to real-life issues. One depicts an imaginary Barbieland, and the other portrays a hero from the atomic bomb era, more than 70 years ago. Yes, Hollywood's creators have long ceased to engage in meaningful discourse within the English-speaking world. They are no longer concerned about this world, or perhaps, for certain reasons, it's inconvenient for them to address real-life issues. Perhaps, in their eyes, most of the audience are like giant babies who can be satisfied with just a pacifier. Since even TikTok can be so successful, why bother making something profound that doesn't please everyone? Take a moment to think about the last Hollywood film that made you ponder. I'm not saying that movies shouldn't be entertaining or that they can't provide simple, light, and purely sensory pleasures. However, when 90% of the world's largest film industry's annual output is brain candy, there's clearly something wrong with this machine. Of course, what's wrong with this machine is another, more complex topic, which I might explore in a separate episode. Back to Jawan itself, I've mentioned some advantages earlier, such as its focus on reality and a well-structured story. Now, let's talk about its drawbacks. Compared to Bollywood's pinnacle works like Three Idiots, Drishyam, and Jana Gana Mana, it has some clear shortcomings. Firstly, director Atlee's lack of maturity is evident in terms of technique. I'm not just referring to poor special effects and mediocre background music, but more in terms of story logic, narrative pacing, scene transitions, and character development. The film's opening is relatively thrilling, creating a sense of suspense and tension. But after the first half hour, it starts feeling slow and drawn out. Excessive use of flashbacks and secondary plot lines disrupts the pacing. Scene transitions and character design appear abrupt and lack logical consistency. Every female prisoner supports the male lead, and they are all portrayed as innocent. The primary antagonist carries both lethal and self-rescue medications at all times. Overall, it feels like Atlee created the script by pasting numerous cliques common in Bollywood films onto a whiteboard, then selecting dozens of them to create a hodgepodge. You might also feel that Shah Rukh Khan, all the other major characters lack emotional connections. This is largely due to underdeveloped characterizations. For instance, there are 6 girls involved in the heist, and you probably won't remember or care about any of them. Another significant issue, common in many Indian films, is a lack of emotional restraint, an inclination to go overboard. For instance, to emphasize a predetermined theme, the film overemphasizes and manipulates emotions, resulting in a loss of authenticity and feeling artificial. One example is when a bank official pulls off a peasant's dhoti naked to showcase the government's corruption and brutality. In an age where virtually everyone, Even in rural areas, as a smartphone and social media is prevalent, this appears highly unbelievable. After all, the Indian government lacks the power to order websites and social apps to delete posts or accounts, nor can it selectively cut off internet access or establish firewalls to restrict people's access. Similar issues are evident in many other Indian films, one example being Hai Bim, which was grossly overpraised a couple of years ago. In that film, the police brutally abused tribal men and marginalized people without restraint, which shocked me. When I tried to ask one of my Indian friends about this, he responded, "Even from 30 years ago, such scenarios appear somewhat excessive and unrealistic." Finally, with an embarrassed smile, he said, "It can only be said to be an exaggeration for artistic expression." This lack of restraint often makes many films feel like they're bashing for the sake of bashing because they take the moral high ground, causing movies that were initially expected to reflect reality to lose their authenticity, becoming mere emotional releases and lacking calm, thoughtful content. You can easily sense this kind of atmosphere in typical political propaganda films from various Communist Party regimes. Interestingly, the movie Hai Bim tells the story of a former member of the Indian Communist Party. In this regard, I'd like to recommend another excellent Bollywood film, Jana Gana Mana, which breaks away from the narrative framework of vigilantes seeking justice. It hints at the dangers when emotions and public sentiment override the law, rejects the emotional expression of mob mentality, and reveals the complexity of the real world. In contrast, Jawan appears more populist in its perspective, or rather, more childlike. In this aspect, it bears similarities to most Hollywood films today. Hopefully, one day, more children will grow up, whether in Bollywood or Hollywood. Well, that's all for today. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share our video. And don't forget to ring the bell for updates, so that YouTube's algorithm can better recommend our channel. See ya!